So this was a really good question I got in. It was in relation to a swing I posted where at impact the rib cage was quite closed through impact. So why would that be a problem? So if the rib cage is too closed, it can often make it difficult for players to manage where the club hits the ground. So it can affect the strike. It can also affect how we manage dynamic loft. So we might end up adding some loft through impact. We can't get that handle forward as much as we'd like, so we might get problems hitting the ball too high. And then also, if we get a stall of this rib cage through impact, often the club face begins to close a little bit early as well. So when we see tour players at impact and when they measure them on 3D, the rib cage can be anywhere from sort of 10 degrees open all the way up to even around 20 degrees open, depending on the player. But when it comes to how to work on it, oftentimes you don't actually want to focus on the ribcage rotation. You want to focus on why does the player want to stall and prevent rotation of the ribcage through impact. Most of the time it's happening for a reason to help the players. So a couple of the most common reasons would be in the downswing. If we get the shaft a little bit too steep, we get the hand pat working a little bit too out, it's a great mechanism to be able to shallow the pitch of the shaft and to get the swing path a little bit more neutral. So that would be one area to have a look at. Another common reason would be when this lead arm gets a little bit too far across the chest for too long in the downswing. So the lead arm doesn't fire off the chest in a good sequence. So what happens is the player is forced to kind of stall their pivot in order to let that lead arm catch up. So getting too narrow in backswing and downswing, that can cause lack of rotation. And then also, if the club face is open, stalling the rib cage rotation is a great way to give you time to square the club face up. So to start working on it, I'd be looking at what's happening in backswing and transition that might be causing you to want to stall the rib cage. But then there's also instances where the backswing and downswing is in pretty good shape. It's just a movement pattern that you might have developed. So then it's just a matter of finding and feeling what impact would be like with the rib cage open. So remember, on video, it might look like the rib cage square. You can have the shoulders pretty square, but if we took the shoulders away, the rib cage would be pointing just after the ball through impact. So just getting a sense, getting into setup, opening up that rib cage and just getting a sense of where it would feel like, and then working on movement drills to get a bit closer. So if you're struggling with any of those things I mentioned through impact, there'd be a couple of avenues you could potentially look at. Okay guys, so just a quick look here at how our pivot, our rotation through the ball, we're going to specifically look at the rib cage rotation through the ball and how that can affect our ability to manage the club face. So two players here, we're going to look at them from the overhead view. So I'm going to take the top player down into delivery, so about P6 here where the shaft is parallel before impact. So we can see this player, so 12 degrees C, so that's 12 degrees closed with the rib cage at delivery. We'll take the bottom player here down to the same spot. Okay, down to where the shaft is about parallel. Okay, different rib cage position here, so 12 degrees open. So what you're going to see as both of these players go through the ball, you're going to see a different release of the club head. So because the rib cage is sort of closed here, you're going to see the club overtake the body in and through impact. You might get a slightly higher rate of closure of the club face at that point, whereas you take the player at the bottom, the rib cage is opening, so at impact the rib cage is 19 degrees open for this player, and you're going to see a much more passive release style of the club face. So the player above at impact is about 5-6 degrees open, and the player at the bottom's 12. So when we take a look then from a different angle, okay, so we'll get here in front of the player, so you'll see here the two club faces at this point. So the one at the bottom here, the club face is sort of matching the player's spine angle at that point. So the rib cage is opening, they're letting the head release, and the face stays quite passive. Player at the top, rib cage not as much open, and then we get a little bit more closure of the club face through the ball. So that's how our pivot and our rotation through the ball can have an effect on our club face.